Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. If you would like to support this channel, please hit the like button and consider subscribing if you enjoy the content. And now let's start with the first story. It's called No Overtime. I used to work for this whole offer job. I was a calibration technician, and my job, along with the two others we had, was to keep our tools and robots in the plant in line with our customers' specs. Failure to do so would allow our customers to pull out of their contracts with no legal ramifications. So an important job. However, the rest of the plant didn't think so, and neither did my supervisor, who the company hired off the street with literally no knowledge of the job at all. We were behind on calibrations big time. This was due mostly to the fact that the lines refused to give us the tools to calibrate them because they didn't want to affect production. My so-called supervisor had no spine and kept telling us to work around it. For reference, we kept 6,000 different tools and robots calibrated, and almost 3,000 in the system were overdue. So yeah, we were in trouble, and it was a ticking time bomb. One of our customers had called and said that next Monday they were coming in for an inspection, but no one seemed to care. I volunteered to work that weekend to get everything on that customer's line calibrated so we could avoid problems. But my boss told me that he couldn't approve any overtime without a detailed list of what I planned to do. I told him I couldn't give him a list ahead of time, as I had no clue which tools were rare or what I would have to replace. But I could log it all as I went and give it to him Monday. He said no, it was either now or I wasn't allowed to show up. So I didn't. Next Monday, the customer comes in, and within an hour of being there, realizes almost all of the tools and robots are 4 months out of date. Immediately shuts down production and sends those employees home and pulls their contract, because now they had to recall 4 months worth of product. They start slamming on my department, to which I just looked at my boss, laughed, and then quit, because screw that. One of my friends that worked there after I left told me the customer renegotiated the contract much more in their favor. So the company got paid way less per product than originally planned. And the company took a loss on profits that year, because apparently the customer ran and told all of the other customers it could, and a storm hit that place. They ended up selling the place after another year. The next story is called Try to Break It. Many years ago, I was unhappy in my job at a university and applied for a job doing the same thing at another prestigious UK institution. They ultimately turned me down, as they felt they could get my skills cheaper elsewhere and already had my UK knowledge and experience within the university. Fine, these things happen. I felt it was a bit short-sighted, but didn't dwell. Eventually, I moved on to another institution regardless. However, my group of similar type employees from across the UK got invited to the institution that turned me down. They want to show their new self-service application that they had just finished developing. When we arrived, the guy in charge, who had taken the decision not to bring me on board, went on and on about how fantastic this new system was, and how the testing was really thorough and everyone loved it. Don't get me wrong, it looks fantastic and flowed really well. He then used the words, "Go on, try to break it. We've tested it really thoroughly." Okay, I will. Now I know the technology they used to develop it inside out. There are search screens you use to find and open records, and a button you can use to return to the search screen and view a different record or search again. When building self-service functionality, you disable this button, obviously, so that students can only view their own records and your code does the search and open behind the scenes. I could see that they had disabled this button, not a problem, but I also knew of a bug in the technology. So I sit down and log in as a test user and start working my way through the screens until I get to the section that collects the protected characteristics. I then press the key combination shortcut for return to search. Immediately, I have the search functionality for this protected characteristic screen and can search all records and view everyone's entries. So I find the presenter's test entry and call him over. His face turns white. The system is live. It's being used by students right now. While scrambling to get his mobile phone out, I continue to scroll through other search results and show that it works on the other screens in the application too. Eventually, the guy that they hired instead of me shows up and says, "We disabled the button. I don't understand." It's a very well-known bug in the technology we use. You can stop it working, but you can prevent the search results from returning anything other than the records belonging to the person logged in. The presenter was absolutely furious, fuming that they'd had to shut down their new system until this issue was fixed, and they'd just gone live with massive internal fanfare. The university that wouldn't hire me because they could get the same skills cheaper ended up paying to borrow my time from my new employers to get me to clean up the mess the cheaper skills made. The third story is called Gladly Doing It. This goes back a little over 20 years. As a kid fresh out of high school, I worked at a major electronics retailer that paid commissions versus hourly. What that means is if your commission for the week doesn't equal $11 an hour, the company pays you $11 per hour for the number of hours you worked. Again, this was just before the turn of the century, when cell phones were relatively new and home theater systems were a status symbol for the well-off. I just so happened to be great at selling both of those. I was making great money as a young man. At some point, a new manager started and wanted the salesman to do weekly inventory instead of the warehouse employees. The manager decided that we would only be paid $11 per hour to do so. This was a major problem for me and the rest of the sales staff, as it was costing us money by taking us off the sales floor. After much arguing and calling out sick on the day I was scheduled for inventory, it was decided that we would be paid the average hourly rate of our commission sales for doing inventory. No one really kept up with how often the salesman clocked in or out during the day. The only thing that mattered was that the sales floor was always staffed. So I would show up for work like normal, but not clock in. I would only clock in long enough to ring up a sale and then immediately clock back out. This drove my average hourly rate to as high as $125 in the first week. The next week, when it was my time to do inventory, I did so gladly, knowing the new pay structure. For 8 hours that day, I made $125 per hour and left in a great mood. This was the last time I was ever put on the schedule to do inventory. I asked the manager when I would be put back on inventory, but he only gave me a "I hate you" look and walked away. Of course, I filled my fellow salesmen in on my idea, and shortly thereafter, it was decided that only warehouse employees would do inventory. The next story is called The Audit Manager. Each audit job is run by an audit manager, and basically their word goes. The first rule of audit is you start with the walkthroughs, going through the entire process with an example transaction. Technically, in case you need to make any changes to the testing approach or risk assessment. But practically, it's mostly so that you know what you are doing for the testing. But for this particular job, Deborah booked me in for a week of testing off-site before visiting the client for a walkthrough. And the working paper, a spreadsheet we record test results on, was atrocious. I had 6 different reports for each sample transaction, and the paper doesn't detail which report the information is from. The formula used to calculate errors is a mess, full of hard-coded figures. It's a nightmare to follow. As I'm working through the paper, I'm making a little changes, adding in the report name, moving columns around so they follow the order you encounter them on the report, changing the error calculations. I get it to a place I'm satisfied with it and hand it to Deborah for review. Well, Deborah is not at all happy. She's been doing this job for years and she liked it the way it was. I explained why I made changes and asked which bits weren't working for them and I could go back over those parts. As an example, there were parts of the paper that used different methods to display errors. I liked one better, so I used it across the paper. Deborah surely couldn't state that they liked it one way in one place but disliked it in another place. Right? Wrong. It was easier before, Deborah says. She had to spend time trying to understand the changes, which meant it took longer to review. And then Deborah gives me the following instructions. Just use last year's template and enter this year's data. Don't change the template at all or any of the formulas. So I did exactly that. It took about half an hour, and the result was absolute nonsense. Even a glance over it would reveal that the error calculations were glaringly incorrect. I was hoping she'd immediately see this and we could have an adult discussion about how to change it. A couple of months go by, and nothing. I take a look at the file, and the paper is completely different. It's not the same as last year's, and it's not mine. And at this point, I'm upset. I drop in a feedback meeting, because I tried to hand in work I was proud of, and if it's not good enough, I want her to at least tell me how I can improve. I just want Deborah to engage with me at this stage. It turns out Deborah handed the job to someone else to redo. When they came back, Deborah was still unhappy and we did it again herself, making many of the same changes I'd made initially. As we run through, I realized that Deborah's using a different report for the first section. So when she came to review it, she couldn't tie my figures up to the correct report. She gave up after the first section, and instead of explaining the problem in a way that I could go through and fix it, just asked it to be redone in the prior year's format. Of course, when I redid it, I used the wrong numbers again. Moreover, if Deborah had booked the walkthrough before I did the work initially, I had known which report to use and could have avoided the mess altogether. The budget is blown out of the water with all the additional time on the job, but hey, unlike Deborah, I'm not graded on that. The last story is called Get Your Lawyer. I work at a place that rents storage units, and we have a customer who is a crusty old jerk, wants to complain about everything. In fact, he complained about stuff that straight up wasn't true. And when presented with a printout of evidence that he was lying, he called us all sorts of names and left. Today he came in for payment, and when I gave him his total, he became belligerent, stating he has always paid a certain dollar amount and will not pay a cent more. Now, unfortunately, we had to raise prices back in January. It sucks, but I'm not the owner, just a desk monkey, so I don't ask questions. I did, however, personally fold and stuff all the envelopes with the notice that we had to increase our rent, so I knew he got it. This guy has never paid the increased rate and is falling behind. Today I was blessed with the holiest of jerkiness. I will be speaking to our lawyer about this, which frankly is music to my ears. Every time he wanted to complain, I responded, "You have threatened legal action. I will only communicate with you through our attorneys." After a few times of this, I think he realized he messed up, but I held firm and annotated in the notes his threat and my refusal to help. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and want to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.